I want to introduce to you this topic in a kind of very simple way, and then gradually expand on the importance of meditation. So I want to begin with a very simple but very powerful quote that I heard from my own spiritual master, Sanka Paul II. I was initiated about some 44 years ago, 1972, 25 years ago. And when I went to India for the first time, he said something which he repeated and a number of times, in which I heard him say in many occasions in many different circumstances. And it became for me a mantra, a powerful affirmations of what I would call the essence of the teachings. What is the essence of the teaching? You want to boil the teachings down to an essence. When you get it down to essence, everything's become very simple and it's very easy to remember. So he said, not once but many times, he said, all glory, all truth, all bliss, and all peace and happiness lie within you. And at first glance, that kind of mantra has its own power to it. And I reflected on it many, many times, because whenever a spiritual master says something more than once, but says it often and many, many times over, he's engraving on your heart, in your consciousness, the essence of what the whole teachings is about. And in that one phrase, you have the whole essence of the teachings. So if you walk out of here and you remember nothing else, and most of us don't remember so much anyways, I want you to remember that. We're going to basically expound on the meaning of that. Simple phrase, all glory, all truth, all bliss, all happiness. Continue. So the important thing to get there is the within you part. That's the critical piece that we forget. In fact, if we had realized that statement, then we would already be realized beings. The problem is, even though we understand it, we don't live by that. We actually live by the motto, all glory, all truth, all happiness lie without. This is how we live our lives. Okay? So what is the proof of that? The proof of that is how much time do we put in meditation? How many people are meditating? So why then is meditation this technology that is so important we understand? Basically, when we take a look at the big picture of spirituality, let's take a look at the big picture first. In the big picture, all great saints and mystics basically paint the same picture. I want to give us the grandiose view first. The grandiose view is that we are beings of love and light. That's who we are. We are beings of love and light. That this whole universe has been created out of light, is maintained through light, and the path back to the source is also through light. And all the great masters, great teachers, have said this in their own way. Jesus has said, I am the light of the world, and who shall ever come to me shall not walk in darkness. And these same statements have been made not just by Jesus, but by Buddha, by Muhammad, by Kabir, by Nanak, and many saints known and unknown throughout the ages. So that light that is within us, we do not know it, we are not aware of it, we have not realized it. And so the second thing that comes out of a great teacher's mouth is, take heed that the light within you be not darkness. So it's the second, you could say, admonition that all the great teachers have said, and this is what Jesus said, take heed that the light that is within you be not darkness. So if we are beings of love and light and life, Or to use a Hindu tradition or expression, we are Sat, Chit, and Anand. Sat is truth, Chit is consciousness, Anand is bliss. Saying the same thing. Why don't we experience this Sat, Chit, and Anand? Why? We have to ask ourselves, if this is the fundamental reality, if the great masters are saying this over and over again, why do we experience the opposite of Sat, Chit, and Anand? Which is basically unhappiness, all right, uncertainty, doubt, agitation, restlessness, to mention a few on the top 10 list. We have to ask ourselves, why are we in states of disintegration, disunity, right, and dis-ease? And they're all connected. So the answers that the great masters give is very simple. We are not connected. We're disconnected. And the whole path, the whole journey of meditation is to reconnect ourselves. That is what this whole journey is about, and that's what meditation is, a reconnection process. So let's go a little bit deeper into this journey. Why are we in states of dis-ease, disconnection, disunity? It is because we are rooted in what the masters call duality consciousness. What is duality consciousness? Duality consciousness is the consciousness that we are separate, individual beings, unconnected to the whole of which we are truly a part and parcel. So our everyday experience of reality is an experience of disconnection. We feel, okay, I am this body, you are that body. I am this mind, you are this body, and never the twain shall meet. We don't feel connected to others. We don't feel that inherent unity to our consciousness with other people. We have a hard enough time just communicating to other people. Most of the time, we have no idea what people are really thinking, even though they say things, we're not sure what they really mean anyways. So we're like ships passing in the night. Communication is not instantaneous, it's not clear, discombobulated. Most arguments arise out of miscommunication because we don't understand what the intention is, what the people's intentions is changing. So this is the state of duality consciousness. When we go a step deeper into this, we look at it and we say, okay, look at duality consciousness, we realize duality consciousness arises, and because it arises, you could say that all wars, all hatred, all sense of separation, epidemics, starvation, ethnic rivalry, terrorism, all of these arise out of duality consciousness. And the premise of duality consciousness in its worst form is that whatever I do to you makes no difference to me. Whatever I do to the planet makes no difference to me. Whatever I do to anyone is disconnected from me. This is the premise of duality consciousness. No, we don't think consciously like that. But the essence of our thinking is rooted in separation. We do not see the effects of our thoughts, words, and deeds on ourselves and other people. And as a result of not seeing the immediate effects of those thoughts, words, and deeds on ourselves, on our communities, on our families, on the globe, on the planet, we have the current situation you see today. So rooted in that comes this idea of ego. Some people have defined ego as edging God out. The definition that our masters give is very similar. It's basically the principle that separates us from others is what separates us from God. Let me say that again. whatever separates us from others is the veil between us and God as well. So we do not feel connected to God because we are not connected to others where God resides. If we saw the God in ourselves, we could see the God in others, but we do not even see the God in ourselves. How can we see the God in others? So when we start, this is the disease of duality consciousness. And that disease has led to the current state of the world today and will continue to lead to suffering, pain, affliction throughout the world. Basically, I think, or you think, or we think that my actions, thoughts, words, and deeds I can do at the cost of others. So it's kind of like masters have said, it's kind of like a body looking at the hand and saying this is a diseased hand. So that's not my hand, let's just cut it off. Or if we have a pain in our heart, well, let me just get rid of my heart. So, and it actually is exactly like that. So we are one body, one consciousness of humanity. Think that if we can just get rid of these evil people, or get rid of those bad people, or get rid of these bad people, right, everything will be perfect. And everything will be right. And that's an example of duality consciousness, which leads to intolerance, which leads to prejudice, which leads to bigotry, which leads to hatred, which leads to war, which leads to all division in the planet. So no one would think of cutting off their hand if they saw it was their own hand. They would say, well, let's heal that hand. Let's find a remedy. Let us bring a healing balm, some medicine to restore that, because we see that it's part of our humanity. So this is the disease of duality consciousness. And all masters and all great saints from all traditions said there is only one remedy for duality consciousness. There's only one remedy that will ultimately heal the world. And that is the remedy of going inside to connect, to reconnect to unity consciousness. And that unity consciousness, my masters say, it doesn't have to be created. Unity already exists. We have just forgotten it. So it's not a question of recreating anything. It's a question of realizing the inherent unity that already exists. So as spiritual beings, when we connect inside, we begin to see and experience unity consciousness. And out of unity consciousness comes lasting truth, lasting peace, and happiness that goes beyond the ups and downs of life. So the answer that the masters give is go within. We cannot achieve any level of lasting happiness or peace or bliss until we realize the unity consciousness. So another way to approach this. Now I want to go into more detail about meditation, the methodology of meditation. But I want to suggest to you some basic principles that are directly connected to the steps in the meditation process, so that we understand that what we're doing in meditation is reconnecting to unity consciousness. And that unity consciousness is where lasting peace and bliss and love last, and is. So what are these, I would call them, the four kind of building blocks, if you will, or pillars, or right understandings that we need to have, that come directly out of the unity experience, that come directly out of the meditative experience, and that then become embedded in our vision on a day-to-day basis. So when we're looking now at the world, we are looking from the point of duality consciousness. As long as we look through these eyes, which are rooted in these five senses through duality consciousness, we perceive everything as other than ourselves. a very interesting story that illustrates a little bit of this. I'm going to share more of this theme tomorrow, but it's the story of a great sage who was giving a talk, and there were some naughty boys in the back. And one of the adults was very, very upset and got very angry and went over and slapped the boy. And as soon as he slapped the boy, the sage, in the exact place where he was slapped, his head turned and he felt the pain of the boy. Because that pain of that boy was his pain. That's unity consciousness. Okay? When there's no separation, because we are one with each other. So that may seem like an impossible thing, but actually, that is what love really is. That is what real love is all about. When my spiritual master was giving a talk in India at the World Fellowship of Religions, he addressed the audience by saying, "Dear brothers and sisters, myself in other forms." Now, he was not trying to be poetic. He was giving you the reality of his experience on a moment-to-moment basis. That's unity consciousness. So what are these four pillars? We can call them the four pillars of our practice. But they're also the key to really being in a state and cultivating a state of lasting bliss or happiness. And I want to actually distinguish between bliss and happiness just for a moment. When we think of happiness in our ordinary lives, most of it is associated with our experience of what happens to us externally. Okay? So back to that original mantra. Right? So we get a raise, get a good job, we're happy for a period of time. And then something happens, like you get a sickness in the family, and all of a sudden our attention is diverted and we're unhappy. And then, some good news happens, like the stock market goes up, and we're very happy because we just made a huge amount of money in the stock market. We're happy for a little bit of time. And then we find out that one of our close friends passed away, and then again back down, and we're unhappy. And this is the kind of roller coaster existence that actually we have on a daily basis. So when the attention is rooted outside to what is impermanent and constantly changing, the state of our awareness will be in a state of constant flux all the time. How do you know we're in disunity consciousness? Because our consciousness is constantly in a state of up and down. And we don't recognize that because we're stuck in the illusion that it is a continuous experience. But when we break it down, we see that every day, the emotions that we go through on a daily basis are a pretty amazing assortment, starting with hurry and worry, getting up in the morning. Then we get going and getting in a traffic jam and start to worry more, start to think about what the boss is going to say, and then we get to the office and we're already hyped up, and we know we're behind schedule, and the boss comes in and gives us a nasty look because we were late, and we start thinking how we're going to deal with the boss, and we're getting distracted. And then, we get a telephone call from home when our kid was acting out in school, and now we got to leave the office and run away because there was an emergency at school. Am I connecting with you here, folks? Okay. Now, you write in the blanks, okay? You write in the blanks. But every day, that is what it's going to look like. Not a single day is going to go by where you plan it to happen one way and it happens and it doesn't happen another way. So that constant flux, if we are looking for happiness through those outer events, got news, folks, going to be major disappointment every single day. Every single day. And I haven't even gotten to the core of the issue, which is relationships. Because that's where we experience most of our pain and most of our discontent and most of our unhappiness. And those relationships are all based upon false expectations of things that are supposed to happen the way we think they're supposed to happen because that's the way we want them to happen, which is not the way it's going to be. So, basic first principle that we come to understand. How can we change the way we see things? By first realizing that so long as we're attached to the outside, we will always be in that state. It is only when we connect to what is permanent and lasting inside, and which does not change, which does not fluctuate, which is our central nature, which is bliss. So that is the only remedy. There is no other remedy. All glory, all peace, all happiness, all bliss lie. Not at all. Not in our relationships, not in our bank account, all right? But within you. So as soon as we start putting our heart where the treasure is, we will begin to experience something more lasting. This is what Jesus said. Wherever your heart is, there your treasure will be. Right now, our treasure is outside. We perceive it as outside, and so long as we perceive the treasure, the gold, the wealth, as outside, we are still in this vast delusionary state, and we will continue to be in that. So, first step in this experience is to think positive, to speak positively, and to act positively. And I want to explain that a little bit. So what does it mean to think positively, act positively, and speak positively? So these are very important. These are what the remedy our masters, the great masters of humanity, have given us to help correct our angle vision. So most of our unhappiness is created by wrong understanding and wrong thinking. And when we change the way we think, we change the way we see reality out there. So we call this the path of positive mysticism. The path of positive mysticism is that we begin to think differently about what's happening out there. We begin to have a different perspective about what's happening out there. So we stop judging, we stop criticizing, we stop complaining. These are the three great ingredients to unhappiness. So long as we are criticizing, so long as we are blaming, and so long as we are judging, the effect of blame, criticism, and judgment is that we will experience unhappiness. We are increasing our unhappiness through those three things on a daily basis. So, and the only way we can change that is by putting a different spin on reality. So it is up to us to see things differently. When we change the way we see things, what we see changes. So think positively, speak positively, and act positively is the essence of what a life of lasting happiness and peace is all about. We are the creators of our own reality. All the great masters have said that. As you think, so you become. As you think, so you become. We're going to think negatively, we're going to act negatively, we're going to speak negatively, and we're going to create a state of awareness and a state of consciousness which is negative. And that consciousness, those negative thoughts draw from the universe all the other negative thoughts. They're similar to it, and every morning we get even more negative thoughts back. So what we put out there is what we are attracting. So you look around and you say, well, who are the people you want to be with on a daily basis? You want to be with that kind of person who the first thing they see you, they start complaining. They start complaining about the weather, they start complaining about their boss, they start complaining about their job, they start complaining about their finance, about their health, complain. And how do you feel when you're with people like that for a long period of time? Well, you start, complaining a little bit yourself because maybe your complaints are worse than theirs. And you should be able to say your complaints too, because just because they're saying, why can't you say yours, right? And this is how that energy multiplies. That's exactly what we're multiplying that energy by being and putting out that energy. Likewise, who are the people you want to be around? People are buoyant, they're happy, they're joyful. You see them, they put a smile on your face, they greet you joyously, they're always smiling, they're happy. And what do you feel about them? You feel, hey, these are the kind of people who uplift me, these are the people I want to be around, right? And that attracts its own result as well. So, first principle is that when we go inside in meditation, we start to see the good. We start to understand the positive. We start to think positively. We start to speak positively. We start to act positively. It changes our whole dynamic of seeing the world. And until we go within and see the nature of that reality, we will continue to think in some way or another. We will be affected by the thoughts and environments in which we live. So we need to get to that state where we are not affected by the environments in which we live. We can only do that if we get connected to what is lasting and perfect inside, and what is peaceful. As soon as we experience that in meditation, then no matter where you are, no matter who you will continue to shine, because that's who you are. So it's a very interesting story I want to share with you that just illustrates this point. The story of a monastery that was going on hard times. And it was a very thriving community, but at some point or another, things started to go wrong. And their community started to criticize each other. They were talking behind each other's backs. They were complaining about each other's behavior. And each person was saying it behind each other's back and sometimes openly. And they all had their reasons why things were going bad. So there was complaining, they were criticizing, and they were judging. And it got to the point where monks started to leave the community. This is not a place I want to be. This is not a place where I feel comfortable. This is not a place where I feel peace, right? Slowly the community started to disintegrate. Monk after monk was left. And also, kind of simultaneously, their economics of their monastery, which was a business, started to fall apart also. People that are on that monastery, don't go near them. It's all bad vibe over there. So they weren't attracting any visitors either. So things got from bad to worse, and finally they had a meeting with the elders, and they said, listen, we've got to figure out what is going on here. So one of the monks, the head monk, said, listen, I heard that there was a rabbi who was very wise and very knowledgeable and could give some sage advice. You know, when you get desperate, you go in, right? Message there. And they said, let's invite him over here and ask him what he thinks we can do to remedy this situation, because things are getting worse on a daily basis. So they invite him over, he comes over, and they give him a very great, respectful greeting, and sit him down, they explain to him what's happening, and he sits there very quietly. And he says, listen, I really can't help you very much. But I can give you one piece of information that is very, very, very important. So what is that information? And he said, I can tell you that there is someone who is the Messiah among you in this monastery. The
Messiah is right here. Really? The Messiah is here? So at first there was great disbelief. How could the Messiah be here? And because he didn't say who the Messiah was, he said, I cannot tell you who he is. He said, things started to change right. So everybody started thinking, well, I wonder who the Messiah is here. And since no one knew who he was, it could be anybody. So they were thinking, well, if it could be this guy, then I better be treating him very nicely, because he could be the Messiah. Over this guy over here, who I thought was such a, he could be the Messiah, so I better change my behavior. And so everybody was thinking like that. All of a sudden, everybody was treating everybody like they were the Messiah, because they didn't want to offend the Messiah. What a crime that would be, what a sin to offend the Messiah. And so everybody started seeing the possibility that the Messiah could be in everybody. And therefore, something very magical happened. All of a sudden, the backbiting disappeared. The criticism disappeared. All of the complaints evaporated, because the Messiah was there somewhere. And the community started to rebuild itself. And there was a kind of camaraderie. Anybody. Maybe we were all the Messiah. Who knows? So the goodwill started to be reestablished. And out of that goodwill came the communion, and the community was restored. And word got out that the place had a very powerful vibe. It was like you walked in and you felt the Messiah everywhere. And along with that, then more and more visitors started to come. And you started to attract more and more people. And then their businesses started to grow and prosper. And so on and so forth. And this is an example of positive thinking, which leads to positive speaking and positive action. That's the first principle that comes out of the meditative experience. We start to see the world with different eyes because we are connected to our reality. The second point is that out of the experience of connection, begin to see and live life joyously in the present. We start to move out of the past, regretting the past, the shame of the past, or the mistakes of the past. Start to live in the living, joyous present. Stop worrying about the future, or what it is going to bring. And we start to be in moment to moment awareness. So my spiritual master said that there are two spikes draining us of our life, and that is regretting the past and worrying about the future. And these two spikes drain us on a daily basis of all of our energy and of all of our zeal and all of our joy. So as we come to understand the importance of living in the living present, we shift into the moment. And in that moment is where the joy and the bliss lie. Joy and bliss is in every moment intrinsically. But if we are not in the moment, no bliss for you and no bliss for me. So we have to be in the living moment, in the living present, in order to experience this bliss. And so what is meditation? It is about, first, step one, reversing the flow of attention from outside to inside. You must go within. And the second is to be in the living moment-to-moment presence within. So meditation is about moment-to-moment awareness. And not just when you are in the meditation experience, but when you come out, we want to stay in moment-to-moment presence. presence. The minute we get out of the living present, we're in danger zone. That's the danger zone. That's where we lose it. And we come into what we call habituated, conditioned, and reactive thinking. And those are the three no-nos if you want to live a blissful life.
Would you repeat that?
Conditioned, habituated, and reactive thinking. So those three things are what rule us. So we are not actually living in the moment. We are responding in an instinctual, reactive way to what's happening. Why? Because we've developed habits of thinking, which develop into habits of speaking, which result in habits of action. So long and unless we get out of those habituated, conditioned, reactive thinking, we will continue to be out of the present moment. And what we don't realize is just how habituated, reactive, and conditioned we really are. That's what we don't get. So we are in those reactive states. Well, and just to explain it very briefly, conditioning is everything that we have been surrounded by in our upbringing, from our religious training, to our education, to our parental upbringing, to the media, to the society that we live in. All of these things are hardwired into our consciousness, and you don't realize that. They're like software systems running the minute you boot up. Okay? And those conditioning lead to habituated habits. So we begin to act not in a conscious way, but in a habituated way. And if you actually were able to slow down and look at a videotape replay of people's interactions with others, you would find that even at the physical level, our actions are like mechanical robots that go repeating themselves over and over again. That's how they are. So, and that leads to reactive patterns, which are those hot places, we call them the hot spots, or the buttons that your spouse and your significant other knows how to press. And bingo, you move on. Out the window. That leads to those reactive patterns. So all someone has to do is bring up a subject matter and finish. We're finished. That's it. Can't go there. Not in the present moment. So my master said that 90%, Master Paul, of our lives are spent at the instinctual level. What does he mean by that? Medulla oblongata. Back here, the amygdala. That's your instinctual brain. That's the brain that you don't think. You just act. We need that brain for fight and flight, but that's not where you're supposed to be all day long. And that's where we are, and that's what scientists actually show right now. He said that at most 15 or 20% of our day we actually do some logical thinking about things. At best. Add to the fact that we spend 6 to 8 hours a day sleeping, I think we're conscious about 5% of the day. I'm giving you the credit, the extra credit there. My personal opinion is there's no awareness unless we go inside. No conscious awareness of the present moment. So is there any wonder that we are not in states of lasting peace and bliss? Hey, the formula's already been worked out. We created that reality. We ourselves. We have to uncreate the reality. So, living in the living present is what meditation is all about. When we sit in our practice, we are watching every thought that goes by and disidentifying with that thought. Okay? Breaking the habituated, reactive, and conditioned patterns, thought by thought. That's what meditation is all about. If we don't break those patterns, if we don't remove those software systems that are already operational, never get to the present moment, not going to be thinking positively, but be reacting to whatever stimulus is on the outside. And there are lots of litmus tests to indicate exactly where we are. My spiritual master used to say something, also used to say, a couple of litmus tests for us to work with. Which leads me to the third point. He said, how do you know, people ask him, how do you know you're progressing spiritually in your meditation? He says, number one, you stop complaining. Automatic, stop. It's going to happen automatically. Why? Because there's nothing to complain about anymore. You're connected. Nothing to complain about. Start seeing things differently. Step 2, say, you stop thinking about yourself and praying for yourself, and you start praying for others and thinking about others. So what's the fundamental basis of all happiness? Our masters have said, all the great teachers have said, the golden rule. I'll expand on it. You want to be happy? Make other people happy. We're all happy. Their happiness is our happiness. You want to be unhappy? Think only of your own happiness. That's it. Step 2. You want to be happy? Think only of your own, of other people's happiness. We have to step out of our singular duality consciousness. That's the only way it's going to happen. So, think positive, speak positive, act positive. 2, live joyously in the living present. It's the only reality that exists. Future and past are 2 non-existents. They don't exist. 3, you want to be happy, make other people happy. The only way that we will achieve anything lasting. So why is that? How is that connected to your meditation practice? So we come to see a different reality, connect to a different reality. We come into the living present in our meditation practice by disengaging from the thought forms that have created our instinctive, reactive, and conditioned patterns. And we start to connect to the wider reality of humanity around us. Begin to experience the innate joy of giving. It is in giving that we receive. We are like conduits. Begin to understand that each human being is like a conduit. You can get connected to the source and be a conduit, or you can cut yourself off from the source and nothing will flow through. So long as you are giving, you receive. As long as you stop giving, we stop receiving. That's the law of the universe. Accept it or don't. So when we experience that once, truly, deeply, we realize that it is in giving that we will receive. And those who are the true givers are the truly gifted, because they get more and more and more and more. There are many now studies on the effect of charitable or volunteer activities in the field of psychology. And they're very interesting. They found that people who were depressed, people who were sad, people unconnected, people who were lonely, that when they got out of themselves and started volunteering, any kind of volunteering, in which there was no pay, but just the joy of giving, all of a sudden, their whole dispositions changed. And they got out of their depressions, they got out of the fear and the anxiety, and they started to experience the innate joy of giving. How does this connect to our meditation? So what happens in our meditation process? Meditation is the journey from selfishness to selflessness. This is not a navel gazing. This is about eliminating all of the blocks that prevent us from seeing the innate unity consciousness. And those blocks are always selfish blocks. When we start thinking of myself and me first instead of others. So we can only progress in our meditations if we do some deep deep thinking about those places in our lives where we put ourselves first and above others instead of others first and above us. Sankhya Paul Singh, our masters have said, truly speaking, the definition of a human being is one who lives for others, not his own self. That is the definition of a human being. So, in our meditation practice, as we go in, these selfish aspects of ourselves, which arise mostly out of hurt feelings at some deep level. We've been hurt by others. We've been wounded by others. And out of that hurt vulnerability, we cut ourselves off from others and stop giving. And that's the healing journey that meditation's all about. As we experience this deep and profound love that is within us, that bliss that comes with that experience of love begins to permeate our whole body, our whole being. And that healing of those old emotions and those old emotional states that separated us from others begins to disappear and be healed and resolved. And that is what the real journey of meditation is all about. So contrary to what all people think, the journey of meditation is all about entering into states of egolessness, of complete selflessness. And the fuel on that journey is the degree to which we can learn to be vehicles of service and sacrifice. And that is why when you look at any great master, spiritual master, you see that their lives are one long saga, song of service and sacrifice to humanity. Continuous service and sacrifice. For the highest interest of everybody. The highest interest of everybody. And the last piece that comes out of this experience of the meditative experience is the experience of total acceptance of life as it is in the moment. Total acceptance, which is a state of surrender, really. Surrender not in the negative sense of the word, but in a very profound positive sense of the word. So sometimes we think of surrender as like giving up, or giving in, or, someone puts a gun pointed at you and you say, I surrender.
Yeah.
That's not the surrender we're talking about. Real surrender is recognizing that there is a greater will working, which is working for the highest good of all beings on the planet. And we are now aligning ourselves, our will, our individual will, with that will that has the highest intentions and benefits for all sentient beings. And we are recognizing that in that alignment to that cosmic love, if you will, that our own lasting bliss, happiness, love, that is where that lies. A state of great, great serenity and equanimity and profound peace comes out of that alignment, which cannot be described in words. Jesus talked about the peace that passeth understanding. So it's not an intellectual state. It is emerging in a consciousness that is everlasting, eternal, and infinite. Okay? And as our soul merges in that everlasting, eternal, and infinite consciousness, bliss becomes your natural, everyday state of consciousness. It is your natural place where you reside. And it really does not matter what is going on the outside. In fact, the definition of that state of radical happiness, use a different term, right? So we don't associate with a regular term. That state of radical happiness is who we already are to begin with. That's We are. So all glory, all peace, all truths, all bliss lie within you. The whole that is the whole. So on this journey, what do we need in order to complete this journey? In order to reach those states of radical happiness, if you will, or bliss that transcends dualities. We need a guide, a spiritual guide, a realized being, someone who's been there and done that, and can guide us on that journey. We need the spiritual practice of meditation. And we need the support of a community in which we can practice the gifts of selflessness, in which we can actually demonstrate on a daily basis that degrees of giving that we are required. And so that we can open the sluice gates of grace. So our masters have said, love is an amazing commodity. The more you give of it, the more you find you have. And that is the kind of paradox of spirituality. That the more you give, the more you are replenished from that infinite source which is truly boundless and has no limit. So when you look at the steps of the meditation path, we can actually directly link each one of these phases to a step in the meditation practice. So I just want to briefly do that, and then let's sit for meditation, because that's the best. So again, the first step was think positive, speak positive, act positive. So that comes the minute we go within and start connecting. We start to change our education. What we thought was a thorn now turns out to be a rose in disguise. Right? It's all about our angle of vision. It's very important to understand how this changes our angle of vision. Right? So it's not that things out there change. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It is our choice how we want to respond to what happens. Okay? This is the angle of vision is changing. So we are now then moving out of the habituated reactive patterns, which is going within, experiencing a moment of awareness, which comes from the one-pointed consciousness or one-pointed concentration, which is stilling the mind. This is the second step. We're stilling the mind. Have to get out of the habituated reactive pattern. So that's our practice is going to help still the mind. The third is that fuel of selflessness that come out of this practice. We call it ethical development. We call it ethical development, moral development, and it is the experience of getting out of duality consciousness. And that is the fuel, you could say, that is the energetic power that comes out of the experience of meditation. Begin to feel other people's joy as our own joy, begin to feel other people's pain as our own pain, begin to feel that unity consciousness. And ethical development or moral development only arises out of that experience. True ethical development, true moral development, what we call true spiritual beings, only arise out of that unity consciousness. Because it's only out of that unity consciousness where it is selfless and there's no hidden agenda involved. All right? Otherwise, you can do acts of kindness. There's a hidden agenda. I want to have my name on a plaque. I want people to acknowledge me. And you'll find that wherever there is a unity consciousness, there will always be burnout at some stage. There will always be burnout. People will do something and they didn't appreciate our good works and they say, you know, I don't think I'm going to give them anymore. They didn't deserve it. Right? This is how we start to think. Oh, you know, they don't like me, I don't like them either. I'm not going to do anything for them. Right? They didn't do anything for me. This is how human beings think. All right? So we'll give up to a point, and then as soon as we come up against our own ego, then that's when we cut ourselves off from unity consciousness. So in the process of meditation, we will learn through the school of inner development that that is wrong thinking. That's erroneous thinking. That's selfish thinking. And that erroneous and selfish thinking only bring more pain on ourselves. And then the last piece, which is that state of unity consciousness. That state of understanding where we have total acceptance of what is happening in the moment for what it is. This is a very important state because most of the time we do not accept what is happening. We want it to be something else. And we want it to be something else so bad that we make ourselves miserable. And that state is simply not going to work if we want to be in the state of bliss. We have to accept what is happening. We have to see that there is a higher will at work, a cosmic will at work that is for our own benefit. And we need to align with that cosmic will. And by the way, that does not mean, I just want to make this distinguished, that all of the so-called evil things that are happening are God's doing. Those are human beings doing.
Yeah.
But we understand that those beings had to go through that experience. And if they didn't have to go through that experience, they wouldn't, but they did. And we understand that there's a higher will at work, that we need to align ourselves with that higher will in our thoughts, words, and deeds. So that's that state of unity consciousness. So when we experience that divine light that we talked about at the very beginning, which is already embedded in this experience of bliss, they are not separate. Bliss